I think we have some copies. Do we have many copies? Yeah. How many people don't have papers or books? We can make a couple more copies if we need. We have more books on the way. I was texting with Jennifer today because she's going to order them. I think they're showing up at their house, and doesn't have confirmation. They said 7 to 10 business days last week, so hopefully it'll show up this week, if not first part of next week. So we'll get some copies of what we have. Kind of wrap that. This got here faster than I thought it would, and I was looking at 4 or 5 different resources that I wanted to do this. So I narrowed it down to 4 or 5, and then, as probably a lot of people that teach class, I got into overanalyzing every one, trying to pick the exact one. And then Greg said, hurry up, pick something, because I'm about done. So I picked one and actually sent it out to Greg and Jeff and Brace, and we kind of all settled on this one. And we're going to dig into this for this class session. I don't know if we'll end at the end of the year, if we'll carry it over into the beginning of next year. And interestingly, that's kind of one of the things that we'll talk about in this. So has anyone ever been in a study like this where it talks about self-evaluation, group evaluation, and kind of help set our minds in the right framework? Has anybody ever done that as a group or individually? I never have. That's one of the things I really liked about this, is this really, I felt it's going to help us build upon what we just got done studying. So we just got done studying about, working with one another, working collectively. And now what I want us to do is we kind of lay out this next year, 3, 5, 10 years. Now I want us to start an evaluation and set ourselves up to where we continually grow, we continually develop, and we work as a group. One of the things that I've done over the years at work is it's my job to kind of keep us going in the right direction. And we've been able to build a kind of a culture of open discussion. If somebody's got a frustration, they just talk about it. And I really feel that in the church, there's a lot of times we get frustrated and we don't want to talk about stuff. We're afraid that somebody will take it the wrong way, somebody will get offended, somebody will not, there'll be repercussions for me saying, hey, I don't understand this, I don't like this. How many of you have seen the movie Big? Tom Hanks is in it. The movie Big, where he's old and goes back young, and he works at this toy store. And so he's sitting at this table of directors, and they're talking about this toy. And he sat there, and he had one simple phrase that caused a lot of chaos. And his phrase was, I don't get it. They were talking about how great this new toy was going to be. And him being like a 13-year-old in a 35-year-old's body was sitting there looking at this toy as a kid going, I don't get it. This is not going to be successful. And everybody else had a different vision but him. And so sometimes we may be sitting in a congregation, in a group, and we may think, I don't get it. I don't understand. But we're afraid to talk. We're afraid to bring that up. And what I want us to get from this is a healthy evaluation of ourselves, a healthy evaluation of what we feel our church is about, our group is about, and kind of where we can go from here. At the end of chapter 1, there's a church evaluation. I would encourage every one of you, fill it out honestly, and make a copy of it and give it to us. I know myself, Brace, Greg, and Jeff would love to see kind of the consensus, because some things that we want to do is we want to build on our strengths, lift up our weaknesses, and edify, because we're all here for the same purpose. And one thing the first chapter will ask us about is, why do you come here? One of the things in business that we talk about is, if you know what you know now, would you hire the person that works for you? And if the answer is no, then they probably need to go. And so for each one of us, if I'm a new person coming to town, would I worship here? Now, hopefully if the answer is no, not everybody leaves. But what can we do to make this more appealing, make it grow? So we have some really good strengths, but we have some really good challenges. I was talking to someone a little while back, and the term they used was fragile, that our group is fragile. And I feel that. I feel that's an accurate statement. Everything we've been through the last couple of years, COVID and beyond, and there's a little bit of fragileness here. I think the conservative church in general is in a fragile state. We've got a world that's ever growing farther and farther away from concrete truth. I grew up in a church, Christian church in Reddington, and my mom and my brother go there, and she asked me to watch one of the sermons that they did on the state of Israel and everything going on in the Middle East. And I did that. And they record, what they do is they live stream the whole thing, record and upload the entire service. And so her and I were talking about this afterwards, and I told her, I said, the one thing I find sad is they've taken what used to be a rather conservative assembly, and they've turned it into an entertainment show and a lesson and more entertainment. And they've got the band and the guitars and the drummers and all the lights, and it's the backdrops are, I just look at that and I'm like, wow. In the short time, my short lifetime, that went from a conservative approach church to now what it is. And again, they're doing it to appeal to a different generation. If you need any copies, Chuck has a handful with him, or Angie does, and we'll get them to you if you want to hold up your hand. So one of the things that I hope comes out of this, so there's a couple of reasons why I picked this one. This was an intentional pick. All of us we talk about growing. We talk about the church growing. We talk about personal work, personal evangelism, inviting others. And there's a phrase that I looked, and I've heard it from half a dozen different people. And that is, you can't give what you don't have. And I know I have been guilty of this in the past, is you don't want to share your faith. You don't want to invite people to church. You don't want to invite them into your spiritual side because it's not as strong as it should be. And I know that's a concern. So what I hope comes out of this is we all get a zeal and a passion for continual growth. The one thing that we never see, and I think it's talked about in this first lesson, is we don't see people retiring from Christianity. Now, we see churches getting old. We see churches dying off. And we see churches that have, a handful of people that continue to work and strive and work until they can't do it anymore. And then they wind up closing the doors. And so the purpose for this is to help us evaluate ourselves, evaluate our church, and kind of help us set some goals for these next few years. Tony Robbins says, and I think I've said this here before, you way overestimate what you can do in a day, a week, or a weekend, but you way underestimate what you can accomplish in a month, a year, or a lifetime. So when you sit there and you look at numbers, and let's say we're 65 people now, and somebody says, well, what would be a good 3-year goal? Somebody says 90. You highly underestimate the effort we could have, what we could accomplish, what's possible. And so that's why, as we dig into this, and we'll start laying some foundation for what is possible. How do we? I spent some time online this afternoon with some contractors that I work with, and they're all smaller contractors that want to grow. And so the first thing we did is we set up a baseline. What do you want? And then we start talking about how we're going to get there. So we will get to that. So in this first chapter, well, before we get there, anybody have any goals that you would like to get out of this? Just looking at the front of this without really digging into what's in it, it says committed to spiritual growth. What are some things that you guys would like to get out of this? We can accomplish every one of those really easy. A couple things I want to get out of this is alignment is one of them. I really think we need to work on our alignment. Make sure that we're all aligned going in the same direction. And I think a study like this can help us do that. Because again, if we work on ourselves, then we will be aligned. We align with one another to go from there.
I think what I got out of just this first chapter reading is, and I think rings true, is the fact that you can look out and point your fingers to what everybody else needs to be doing, what everybody's not doing, and then you start looking at yourself, and it's like the old thing, when you point a finger at somebody, the other three pointing back to you. Mr. Microphone here is in charge.
I want everybody to hear.
Oh, okay. But I think the big thing is what can we do to get a restart? I mean, I think that there's some of us that are getting old, some of us are old, and we don't. We sort of feel like, hey, we've done our duty, we've done our yeomanship, and it's time for somebody else to take the reins and get moving. And yet we don't see that. It seems like everybody is just kind of almost dead in the water. It's like, what can we do? What can we do? Well, wait a minute. What are you doing on that part of it? And I think, regardless, I know as I get older, my wife needs to do more.
Right.
Yeah. Oh.
Now Chuck's ready to take the mic from you.
No, but like I say, we can always see what others need to do, but we very seldom take responsibility for what we're supposed to do. And I think that's what Steve pointed out in this first chapter was we need to do the sowing and the planting and let God give the increase.
Absolutely. Greg's got a comment. How many of you remember back? I know one of the things when I first started in the conservative church, one of the things that always impressed me was the amount of people on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night was pretty consistent. You didn't have a massive drop-off like you see now. So you might see Sunday morning were 70 people, and Wednesday nights were 30, 40. So we've seen a change in culture and change in focus. And I think something like this can help us to possibly encourage some that don't attend all the time to take advantage of the opportunity. And that's truly what it is. This is an opportunity for us to be together, study, and be edified and encourage one another. Great.
Actually, met someone this morning, first time I'd ever talked with him, and we got around to the topic of, who do you worship with? And she was telling me about how they had come out of a different faith, a different practice, and said, you know, we really like the fellow because he came out of that same denomination with kind of a reboot and went a different direction. We really liked the fact that he knew our experiences. But then we got a new preacher, and it's all about programs. It's programs. We got programs for this and that. And she said, it's more than about the programs. So there's, and this first lesson actually goes into, you know, when you institute formal, or I should say even organized approaches to stimulating one another to love and good works, there's nothing wrong with calling that a program, but a lot of people are not going to respond to the next new program, or it'll be superficial or short-lived. And so I think as far as a goal goes, you talked about reboot. I think it's going to take all of us doing a lot of introspection, a lot of self-evaluation to say, I can be part of a program, or I can be in love with my Lord and on fire to do his work. And those are two different things. You could just tell by the way the conversation went that she wasn't all that excited about there's another new program coming along the way, but rather that that hope that drives us to do things we otherwise wouldn't do. That desire to see the Lord and be with the Lord forever, that is supposed to be the motivation. I know as a shepherd, I struggle with, how can I do anything to motivate people if the promise of heaven is not motivating people? What do I have to offer? What does the church have to offer? And if we're part of a church because they offer something besides heaven, I wonder if we're part of the right congregation or not, because that's not really what I'm after. Social clubs are not what I'm interested in. It's drawing close to God because he loved me first. And so we can use programs, don't get me wrong, to organize our thoughts, to organize our work, but for all of us to be waiting on the next program to start before we can be alive or excited or in fire about anything, or just having conversations like that just pop up as part of daily life with people that you don't know, I think we'd have to, again, do a lot of self-searching.
Yeah, there's a lot of that Jim and Greg talked about, or some of the goals that I took away is what I hope to come out of it. Focus is one. You know, focus on where are we going now, and everybody knowing where we're going, because I really think we have, in this world of religious organizations, that it's program, noise, just chaos. There are people out there that would like a simple approach to serving God. I really believe that there are hundreds of people that would be interested in what we have. But how do we get them to know? We've got to be that different person, that person that stands out. And that's something that is hard. It is difficult when you're in the workplace and you're in different scenarios. You've got to be willing to have that discussion and have those conversations. And I think this also builds on this one another focus. I said that a little bit earlier. I really feel that this is going to help us as we look at being part of one another. This is going to help us take a deep look and ask ourselves, how can I be part of this growing transformation, reboot, growth focus, whatever you want to call what we're going through. But as we look around, I mean, we've got a lot more older people than younger people, and we have to start being an exciting group that welcomes people in on a regular basis. So the basis of this, if you look in for the first chapter, is 2 Corinthians 13. So when Steve writes about this, he writes about how the letter to the Corinthians, the church of Corinth, had a lot of problems. They had problems with tons of stuff. I mean, we could list every problem we struggle with today, other than excessive cell phone use, they probably fought with. They had problems with divorce and suing each other, be mad at each other, sexual immorality, drunkenness, envy, slander, all these problems. And in this, Paul tells them in 2 Corinthians 13:5 to examine yourself. So what's the value in examining yourself? Because Jim talked about how when you get frustrated, you look around and say, well, it's time for somebody else to do stuff. What's the benefit in examining ourselves? What can we get out of that? Absolutely. Yeah, you'll be way less likely to point at people, or you'll be more sympathetic with people. What other things can we get out of a good self-evaluation?
If you examine yourself and you change yourself, it's more likely to cause a chain reaction. Because if I'm over here being a bum, not doing anything, not caring about my faith, and then someone walks up and they're like, hey, I want to be so filled with God that it's flowing out of me. I'm going to be like, oh, I want to be like them. And so then it just causes a chain reaction, because if you're the first person to change, everyone's going to look at you and be like, wow, like, look what they're doing. Let's all work towards God together.
Yeah, Samantha kind of grabbed mine, but I mean, the reality is when we do honest self-introspection, we see the areas where we need to work. I mean, when we're honest with ourselves and really examine ourselves in the light of the Word, I mean, that's the point of James 1. Look in the mirror. I mean, if I want to know what I look like in the morning before I go out to work or go out on a date with my wife at night, then I go look in the mirror and figure out what I need to fix. Some things can't be fixed, but from a spiritual point of view, we look into the mirror of the Word of God, and when we see the things that need to be fixed, hopefully we work on correcting those. God's Word shows us clearly what we're supposed to look like. If I don't look that way, then I've got some work to do, and that work begins with me. And Emily's right. I mean, that kind of work that we seek to do in growing spiritually ourselves can be contagious. We've all known of people spiritually whose behavior makes us want to be better people. And so when we grow the way we should, that kind of growth can become kind of a contagious thing that then spreads to other members doing the same kind of work on themselves, which ultimately helps the body to grow in the ways that we're looking for. So
I think also when we look at ourselves and we take accountability of our actions, we're less likely to focus on other people and be filled with that bitterness and annoyance that we get from looking at others and saying, well, they're not doing what they should be doing. Well, they're not following the way God said to be followed. Instead, look at ourselves. We're going to have less time to just pent up all those emotions that we shouldn't be focused on.
I mean, Jesus says in the gospel, instead of trying to get the plank out of somebody else's eye or a speck out of somebody else's eye, first look at the plank in your own eye.
Self-examination also isn't limited to faults that we find in ourselves. It can also be about learning our strengths. And I put that one of the reasons we examine ourselves is to learn about ourselves. I think we struggle to articulate our needs. I think we struggle to know how to really describe what it is we're looking for. And if we can try to learn about the motivations behind why we do what we do and try to learn about, why do I respond this way when I feel wronged, or why do I act this way when something goes right? Just knowing that about ourselves helps us to navigate so many situations better if we are aware of ourselves and know ourselves. And it's especially useful if we learn those things, if we're able to share those with others. I'm this way because of this or that, or this is my personality. This is how you gave us a lesson about personality types and how those may interact very differently with each other, and different approaches may work far better with one person over another. Well, you'll never know that if you don't examine yourself, one, to know it, but two, share it with someone else. Actually let people know what you discovered about yourself.
Well, it goes back to being open. So the little and an interesting segue to that, in the second part of this chapter, it talks about a comparison to the church in Ephesus when it was written to as a strong congregation, and then the letter was written to it in Revelation. And there's a big contrast in a growing, thriving church that you see the letter that was written to them versus the way they're discussed in Revelation. And it talks about down at the bottom that we have a duty to encourage one another because uncorrected problems lead to struggling congregations. And you struggle first spiritually, then it creates emotional struggle, then numerically you struggle because people leave, then eventually gets to financially you struggle, and then eventually you close the door. And it's all, and a lot of this cycle that we're seeing can be prevented with good active groups, with good open conversations between members and leadership, and having a clear direction. And that's one of the things I really hope that we take out of this, is we're going somewhere and we really want to take people with us. We want to add a few more people and a few more people. And it's not really just like it talks about in here. Paul planted, Apollos watered, God gives the increase. It's our job to plant and water. It's God will provide the increase in the numeric side and the growth side. All right, so we look over on the second page, the reference to the church at Thessalonica. In 2 Thessalonians 2:15, it says, "Therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold to the traditions which they were taught, whether by our words or our epistles." And then later, Paul emphasized to those that walked. Later on, Paul emphasized that those who walk disorderly and not according to the traditions should be withdrawn from. And he addresses these. And when we look at we use the word adherence, how we follow biblical patterns, strong biblical teaching. We have an obligation to our fellow members, to Jesus and to our God, to make sure that everything we do is in accordance to his will, to the best that we understand it. Brace gave a lesson Sunday night about how our assembly does not look like the first century church. I promise you, when the first century church got together to study, they didn't have it set up like we have it set up now. It looked probably a lot different than that. It was probably more of a informal, like we see in our home Bible study. It was a very informal setting. And you had those that would teach or instruct or read letters. They didn't have the access to what we have now. And so we have to remember that we have to hold fast to solid biblical teaching. And when those that are among us won't, and some of those strong biblical teaching we are to use what God gives us, the talents that we've been given. One of the things that I have struggled with and considered over the years is I don't want to get to heaven standing in front of, or on Judgment Day, standing in front of Jesus and go, "I'm here, the 3-talent man." And he said, "No, you were a 5-talent man. You just didn't try." And that's a sobering thought. So what talents do we have inside of ourselves. And that's another benefit of this self-introspection, is what are some talents that are inside each one of us that we don't currently use, or maybe something that we did at one time and let slip away because we're getting busy and distracted. I really enjoyed the last, what's it been, 7 months now, being able to preach from time to time, because that's something I did once every couple years, 3 years. And it's something I really enjoy doing, that I feel I have an ability to do, but it was a talent that wasn't being used. And so now we've got the opportunity to do that and to develop guys like Josh, who hadn't done that until he had been here. And so this gives us an opportunity. So every one of us has all these talents inside of us. And later on in Thessalonian letter, it talks about strongly exhort those who do not work. So what does it mean to exhort somebody? What does the word exhort mean? You know, I exhort you to go forth and be prosperous. Encourage. Strongly encourage. You know, or urge. It is a passionate plea. So to exhort somebody to action is to strongly plead with them and urge them to be active. And so when we see those that are wavering in their efforts, or not using talents, or not wanting to participate, you know, we're told to exhort them to good works. Because it helps everybody go in the right direction. He also talked about the parable of the talents, which we mentioned a little bit ago. Is we don't want to get to the end of our lives and waste our talent. I was at years ago, I was at a house on Sweetwater Lake, and the guy who just bought it, moving into it, he was older, probably in his early 70s, and got there, was looking at their HVAC system, and we went on the deck because he was telling me about some stuff he was doing to it, and I told him, man, this is a really nice place. He said, you know the only problem in this place? So what's that? He said, it took me till I was 70 till I could afford it. He said, you know, the problem with wealth is it's wasted on old people. He said, we almost need to do it the other way around. Give all the money to the young people and then let them enjoy it. And then when we get old, we don't need that much. And I thought that was an interesting concept. But what was that? It's a crazy concept. Yeah. But when you youth is wasted on the young? Yeah. Right. Yeah, save the youth up, give the youth to the older people, and let the younger people, you know, suffer with all the aches and pains. But when you look at that, you look at as we get older in life, there's so much wisdom inside of some of our older members. And a lot of times we just allow them, we just naturally get less and less active, and it is hard. I can feel that. I mean, I'm still young, 52, and most of you are going to be like, yeah, it's still way young. But I can see how when you get older, it's harder to stay as active. And we hope to change that. We hope to work on that. Do some introspection. That way we can, you know, work all the way up until we physically can't. And even if it's a little thing, it's amazing how many little things add up really fast. All right, any comments, questions? Get away from the microphone.
I like the idea of exhorting to work. That it seems to be more encouraging, maybe helping people know what their talents are. It's so easy for us to not have the confidence, and maybe we have a talent that we're not even aware of. And for someone to say, you know, we need someone to do such and such, and you have that talent, it would be much better than being harsh and wondering why people aren't doing things. And maybe they're not aware that they can do it. I like the fact that
Yeah, that's very true. And there's a slight difference between, encouraging someone and just saying, well, why don't you do this? Have you ever considered this? So, by the way, the result of me teaching, I was exhorted to teach. Someone in this audience that, was probably sitting that far side, this far front, said, hey, it's time for you to teach. I said, I don't want to. I don't like teaching. It's scary. I'd rather stand up there, preach all day long, because you guys can't talk. So, if you ever ask a question that I don't know the answer to, at work we have this phrase it goes like this. Well, it's kind of like a capacitor. It just makes things work better. So if you ever ask me a question I don't know the answer to, I'm probably going to say, well, it's kind of like a capacitor. It just makes everything work better. So that's the phrase that we use at work. We don't really know the answer. So that's the answer you're going to get. If you ask me something, I have no idea. I'm not going to say I don't know. I will tell you it's kind of like a capacitor. It just makes things work better. But that is a very good point. And there's a lot of people develop talents and find out that things aren't as scary as they thought they would be when somebody encourages them, motivates them, exhorts them to jump into something that they've never done before. Good comment. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Pareto principle. How many are familiar with the Pareto principle? It's the 80-20 rule. In the church, 20% of the members do 80% of the work. And that goes back a little bit to what Jim was talking about, is those that do the work naturally will just do it. And when you find people that don't participate, well, I'll just do that too. Well, I'll just do that too. And to where it becomes a small percentage of the people are doing all the work. So what's the challenges that creates? What if we just allow that? I mean, 80% of the work's getting done. Stuff's getting done. Why not just let the 20% do it? They must like to do it. So it wears them out and they get burnt out. It's easy to get down, easy to get frustrated, tired, exhausted when you see that you're the only one doing the work.
You can also get spread too thin and you end up doing a poorer job at a lot of different jobs instead of doing your best work on maybe one or two things. And so, I mean, if you get too many irons in the fire, you can become a jack of all trades and a master of none, when the church would be better served if there were more people who were working and we all developed our talents so that we could utilize them more fully, more efficiently, and for greater edification in the whole body. I mean, one person can only do so much. And so, I mean, Samantha's right. You get burned out, you get tired, but you also can't do your best work if you're trying to fulfill too many roles. You may get them done, but not as well.
Greg's got a comment about that. And I think every one of us have experienced that in a work environment. We get in a job, and if you're good at your job, what happens? You get one more thing given. Well, they can handle one more thing because they're good, and one more thing. Then you finally get to the point where you've got too many things to juggle, and you can't focus on that. That's the life of an entrepreneur, a life of a business owner. This is my life for 30 years. You grow and grow and grow until you can't do it anymore. Then you have to delegate and give that to someone and let them do it. And then what you find out is when you delegate, you can elevate your efforts, your activity, and the things that you can accomplish. So yeah, that's a great way to talk about that. Yes, sir.
There's a biblical model of highest best use. You had You had evangelists who said, you know, the service for the widows are being neglected, and we need to find someone that can do that work so we can devote ourselves to a higher purpose. And it wasn't that they weren't capable of the work, but there was the converse wasn't true. You had those that had not been inspired to be teachers. They couldn't take the place of those who were going to step down from one activity in order to fulfill another. And smart organizations figure out how to get people to their highest best use. What are they most skilled at? What is their greatest productivity? And let's focus on them getting those kind of things accomplished. And then to other tasks that have different set of needs and different set of skills, spread those around to other people.
There's a thing that we use to evaluate people, and it's 3 letters, GWC. And you can use this in the church setting too. Do they get it? Do they understand what the role and what the activity is all about? What the purpose of doing this work is? Do they get it? Do they want it? Is this something that they're passionate about, excited about, and it fulfills them? Because if you're doing something that you get and you want, that excites you and fulfills you, you're going to be more active in it. You're going to want to be part of it. And then the third one, do they have the capacity to do it? And if they do, if the answer is no to capacity, is it a teachable capacity? You know, if somebody really enjoys one-on-one Bible study, but they don't have the capacity, let's say it's a young person that loves that, but they don't have the Bible knowledge, you can teach that. A lot of times you can teach capacity. You can't teach, do they get it or do they want it? Capacity, doing the stuff, you know, visiting, sending cards, sending meals, encouraging, edifying, that stuff's teachable. Preaching is teachable. Teaching class is something you can teach. Teaching song leading is something you can teach. It's hard to improve bad singing, but you can teach somebody how to lead singing. All right, we got just a couple minutes left. What happens if we don't focus on motivation and exhorting one another and making sure that we are always moving forward? We go backwards. Yeah. Very seldom does anything stay still. Yeah. If you're not moving forward, you're always sliding a little bit farther backwards, a little bit farther backwards. So one of the best ways to do this, you know, one of the common obstacles, this is big and bold on the 3rd page, a common obstacle to church growth is that a small percentage of the congregation buys into the plans for growth. Do you believe that the church can grow? Do you believe that there's hundreds of people, thousands of people that want a great, connected, inspiring place to worship? Because if you don't believe it, you'll never find it. Jim, do you have a comment?
Just say that one of the things that I've noticed in several places that we've been to as far as part of groups over the years is that there is a limited amount of interaction among most of the membership. There are some folks that, you know, want to enjoy your company, and then there's other people that, you know, could care less. And I think if you expect the church to grow in that respect, you've got to have I won't say a camaraderie, but at least a respect for the fact that you need each other's company. You need to get to know each other. How can I expect you to do some things that I think would benefit us both if I have nothing to do with you? And that, I think that's, I know years ago we had here, I don't know if anybody remember, but had a terrible cliquish It was just certain people were always with other people. And I mean, you'd call somebody, say, can you come over, have a bite to eat? Well, they couldn't because they were in their group. And that's discouraging from the standpoint that doesn't mean you can't find somebody else, but there are always someone, I think, is looking at you and saying, you know, I wish I could be a friend with that person. Or there was a young fellow that is no longer here, and his complaint to me was nobody talks to him. And I told him, he said, nobody's friendly. I said, you know, before you can expect a friendship, you got to be a friend. And, you know, didn't work for him. But I just think that's not the only thing that helps us. But I think that's one thing.
Yeah, that would. I mean, you mentioned it doesn't have to be a camaraderie. Sometimes we just need a willingness to stand one another. Because sometimes we're almost so standoffish. We just need a willingness to be together. So we'll talk about that. So how do we? Because one of the challenges, and this thing is something that me, Greg, and Jeff had a long conversation about. How do we in the first century church, in these boxes we live in, and these electronic devices that grab our attention, how do we promote activity, unity, and focus inside a building when we're here, or inside an organization, really, not even the building, when we are only together 3 times a week? What are some practical things that we can do? Then we're going to talk about motivation and how do we motivate one another for love and good works. Then we're going to get into the evaluation side. Appreciate your comments. You weren't scary. So I will come back on Sunday as long as you're nice to me. We'll keep doing this as long as we can. So appreciate you guys. We will see you on Sunday.